Don't forget to like and share this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments below and sign up to stay updated with our latest content. I never thought a flickering porch light would change my life. At 44, I had settled into solitude, work, home, the occasional glass of wine, and the quiet hum of a life on autopilot. But one crisp autumn evening, everything shifted. A simple offer from the quiet man next door, someone I barely knew, opened a door I didn't even realize I had closed. What started as a small gesture slowly unraveled years of loneliness and fear. I didn't expect connection. I didn't expect to feel seen. But that's exactly what happened, and that's where the story begins. For years, my life had followed a predictable rhythm. Mornings were rushed, evenings were quiet, and weekends passed in a blur of errands and mild distractions. I wasn't unhappy exactly, but I wasn't truly living either. I had become used to the stillness, used to carrying the weight of everything alone. Friends drifted, relationships never quite lasted, and eventually I convinced myself that independence was enough. There was a strange kind of comfort in the routine, even if it felt empty at times. I filled my days with deadlines, books, and solitary dinners, telling myself this was just how things were. After all, who had time for connection anymore? Who had the energy to start something new? I had stopped believing that anything or anyone could surprise me, and yet all it took was a flickering light and a knock on my heart I didn't expect to hear. I had stopped believing that anything or anyone could surprise me, and yet all it took was a flickering light and a knock on my heart I didn't expect to hear. It was a chilly autumn evening. I had just gotten home from work, weighed down by the kind of stress that lingers in your bones. The air smelled of firewood and fading leaves, and the golden crunch beneath my boots reminded me that the year was slowly slipping away. As I reached for my keys, sighing at the flickering porch light I had ignored for weeks, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, looks like you could use a hand." I turned to see Daniel, my neighbor of 5 years, standing just beyond the fence, hands in the pockets of his worn jacket. We had exchanged pleasantries in the past, brief nods and small talk about the weather, but nothing more. He was polite, quiet, and kept to himself, just like me. Still, there was something in his tone, calm, observant, sincere, that made me pause. Normally, I would have politely declined. I was used to doing things on my own, to handling life without asking for help. But for reasons I still can't fully explain, I said yes. As he worked on the light, we spoke casually, but it felt different, genuine, unforced. I learned he used to restore old homes before moving into commercial work. He learned I worked in publishing. The porch light came back to life with a steady glow. And in a way, so did I. The porch light came back to life with a steady glow. And in a way, so did I. After that night, something subtle began to shift. I started noticing Daniel more, his quiet presence, the way he always greeted Max, his loyal dog, with the same warmth he reserved for the world. We saw each other more often, at first just in passing, a wave from across the street, a nod as I took out the trash. But slowly, those moments grew into something more. A quick conversation turned into 5 minutes on the porch, then 10, then an hour sitting side by side, watching the sky deepen into dusk. There was something easy about talking to him. I didn't feel like I had to perform or prove anything. I could just be, and he never pushed. He listened in a way that made me feel like every word I said mattered. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, I came home feeling completely drained. I didn't have the energy to cook, let alone talk. But there he was again, leaning against his truck, Max at his feet. He took one look at me and said, "Come on, you need a break." No pressure, just an invitation. His house smelled like cedar and something faintly spicy, comforting, familiar, like the feeling of being welcomed without question. He poured me a glass of wine, no words needed, and we sat in silence. Max resting his head on my knee, my heart finally beginning to exhale. It was the start of something I hadn't even known I was missing. A friendship, a rhythm, a quiet return to myself. A friendship, a rhythm, a quiet return to myself. That night at Daniel's house marked a turning point, not because anything dramatic happened, but because of what didn't. There was no pressure to talk, no awkward silences to fill, just presence. And that, I realized, was what I had been craving without even knowing it. Over the following weeks, the walls I'd spent years building started to loosen. Daniel didn't ask intrusive questions. He didn't need to. He simply created space, soft, steady space for me to show up however I was. And slowly I did. We began sharing more. Not just about work or the weather, but about the things that weighed on us. He told me about restoring old homes, how he loved bringing life back into forgotten spaces. There was a sadness in his voice when he spoke about the past, but also pride. I shared pieces of myself, too, stories I hadn't told in years, about regrets, missed chances, and quiet heartbreaks I had buried deep. He never interrupted, never judged. He just listened. One night, as we sat under the porch light he had fixed now glowing steadily, faithfully he reached over and placed his hand gently on mine. "You're not alone, you know," he said softly. I didn't respond right away. I didn't have to, because in that moment something inside me shifted. I wasn't just being heard, I was being seen. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The fear of vulnerability didn't vanish, but it began to soften. Daniel didn't rush me to open up. He simply stood at the door and waited. Daniel didn't rush me to open up. He simply stood at the door and waited. And slowly, I began to walk through it. It started with small moments, a cup of tea on a quiet afternoon, a shared laugh over a badly cooked dinner, Max resting between us like he belonged to both of us. Each encounter built something subtle yet real, a foundation, a kind of trust I hadn't felt in years. Then one Saturday morning, Daniel showed up at my door with a simple question. "Want to go for a hike?" I almost laughed. Me? Hiking? I didn't even own boots. But there was something in his voice, hopeful, steady, that made me say yes. The trail was beautiful. Crisp autumn air wrapped around us and golden leaves painted the forest floor. We didn't speak much at first, but the silence wasn't heavy. It felt peaceful, grounding. With each step, I let go of more than just stress. I released parts of the emotional weight I had carried for far too long. About halfway in, we reached a clearing that overlooked the valley. We sat side by side on a flat rock, Max curled at our feet. The view was breathtaking, but it wasn't just the landscape that left me still. It was Daniel, his quiet presence, his patience, the way he didn't try to fix me, but simply walked beside me. He turned to me then, his voice soft. "I used to come here alone, but I don't want to be alone anymore. And just like that, the hike became something more. Not just a walk through nature, but a walk into something new. Something we hadn't yet named, but both felt forming between us. Not just a walk through nature, but a walk into something new. Something we hadn't yet named, but both felt forming between us. After that hike, things changed not in dramatic ways, but in quiet, meaningful ones. We began spending more time together, not out of habit, but because it felt right. There was a rhythm to it now, a quiet understanding. No need for constant conversation, just the comfort of knowing someone was there. Daniel would stop by with coffee some mornings. Other times, I'd find myself walking toward his house without a plan, just a pull, a feeling that I'd be welcome, and I always was. One Wednesday afternoon, he knocked on my door holding a small paper bag. Inside, freshly baked cookies. "You look like you could use something sweet," he said, with that warm, almost shy smile of his. We sat in my kitchen sipping tea, the smell of cinnamon filling the room. It should have felt ordinary, but nothing about this felt ordinary, because trust was growing in those in-between moments, the unspoken gestures, the quiet glances, the space to just be. I was starting to realize that trust isn't always built through grand declarations. Sometimes it's in the way someone looks at you and sees past the armor, or in how they remember the smallest details, like how you take your tea or the kinds of days that leave you drained. And slowly, I was beginning to trust him, not just with my time, but with the parts of myself I had hidden for too long. And that's where the fear crept in. As much as I felt safe with Daniel, as much as his presence calmed me and his kindness warmed me, there was a part of me that couldn't stop questioning everything. Was I moving too fast? Was I reading too much into our quiet connection? Was I setting myself up to be hurt again? I had been here before. I had trusted, hoped, and been let down. And those old wounds, they didn't just disappear because someone new was kind. They lingered, whispering caution. I found myself pulling back at times, creating distance I didn't fully understand. I would catch myself hesitating before replying to a text or overthinking a simple invitation to coffee. Daniel never pressured me. He noticed, I think, but he gave me space. And that only made it harder, because it showed he cared in a way I wasn't sure how to receive. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sky turn from gold to gray, I could feel the weight of it all pressing in, the comfort and the fear. I wanted to lean into him, to let go completely, but the voice in my head wouldn't stop. What if it doesn't last? What if you're wrong again? That's the thing about healing, it's not linear. Even the gentlest hands can brush against a scar that still aches. I knew there was something real growing between us, but the deeper it got, the more I had to face the hardest truth of all. I wasn't just learning to trust him, I was learning to trust myself again. But trust, like all fragile things, needs moments of truth, moments that test it, stretch it, and ultimately reveal its strength. It came on a quiet afternoon, just a week after our hike. I was still sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open but untouched, when I heard a knock at the door. I almost didn't answer. Part of me was still tangled in hesitation, but when I opened it, there he was, Daniel, with a small bag of cookies in one hand and that calm, steady look in his eyes. "I figured you could use something sweet," he said, his voice light but lined with something deeper. That moment, simple as it was, became a turning point, not because of the cookies, but because he saw me again. He stepped inside and we sat at the table, the scent of cinnamon between us. As we talked, he gently said, "You don't always have to carry everything on your own, you know." I felt the lump rise in my throat. His words hit harder than I expected, not because they were new, but because they were true, and because someone was finally saying them aloud. I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time I said the thing I'd been afraid to admit. "I don't want to be alone anymore, and I trust you." He didn't rush to respond. He simply smiled, eyes warm, voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, something in me surrendered, not in weakness, but in freedom. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was the start of healing. This wasn't just a new chapter. It was the start of healing. The days that followed felt different, not in some grand cinematic way, but in the small shifts that only the heart can truly notice. Mornings were no longer just quiet routines. They held the memory of laughter shared over coffee, of Max nudging my hand as if reminding me that, yes, I belonged here. Daniel and I didn't rush anything. We didn't define what we were. We simply showed up for each other in the little things. We hiked more, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about everything from childhood dreams to fears we had never voiced. We cooked together badly at times, but the laughter that followed made it feel perfect. He'd leave notes by my door when I had long meetings. I'd surprise him with dinner when I knew he was too tired to cook. And yet, the most meaningful part of it all wasn't in the doing, it was in the being, in knowing that I could be exactly who I was, and that was enough. For so long, I had armored myself in independence. I told myself it was strength. But now I saw the truth. Real strength is allowing someone in, even when the past has taught you to be wary. Daniel never asked me to change. He simply offered space for me to grow, to soften, to heal. And in that space, something beautiful bloomed. It wasn't about fixing each other. It was about choosing to stay, to begin again, not from scratch, but from truth. And that was everything. To begin again, not from scratch, but from truth. And that was everything. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much has changed, not just around me, but within me. The woman who once walked through life quietly, guarding her heart, hiding behind routines and solitude, she's still here, but she's no longer afraid of being seen. Daniel didn't rescue me. He didn't swoop in to fix a broken life. He did something far more meaningful. He stood beside me patiently, gently, until I was ready to step forward on my own. And that's the big realization. Sometimes the greatest gifts in life don't come wrapped in grand gestures or life-altering events. Sometimes they arrive as a quiet knock at the door, a helping hand, a porch light, a dog named Max, and a neighbor who simply sees you even when you've forgotten how to see yourself. I used to believe that protecting my heart meant keeping people out, but now I know the real strength lies in letting the right people in. What Daniel gave me wasn't just connection, it was permission. Permission to trust again, to hope again, to love, not with certainty, but with courage. Because life's most beautiful chapters often begin when we least expect them. And sometimes the most unexpected story is the one that changes everything. So if you've ever felt like it's too late to open your heart again, let this be your reminder. Sometimes all it takes is one unexpected person to remind you that you were never meant to go through this life alone. As we grow older, it's easy to believe that our best connections are behind us, that it's too late to open up or let someone new into our lives. But this story reminds us that meaningful relationships can blossom at any age, often in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes all it takes is a small act of kindness, a helping hand, a listening ear for healing to begin. True companionship doesn't come from grand gestures, but from feeling seen, heard, and accepted. It teaches us that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having the courage to trust again, even after heartache. For older adults, this is a powerful truth. Life isn't over when routines set in. It's simply asking us to notice the moments where love can still grow. Because no matter our age, we all deserve connection, and we are never too old to begin again. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Please share in the comments one insight you gained and how you plan to apply it in your life. Your feedback is invaluable and keeps us motivated. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support enables us to continue creating content that informs and inspires. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.